The United States is a beautiful country. It has some magnificent landscapes, culture-enriched cities, and quaint small towns in between. But some areas haven't been so lucky. One area in the United States which experienced its fair share of unluck is the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt is a geographic area extending from eastern Missouri to New York State. The core of the Rust Belt is around the Great Lakes, particularly Lake Michigan and Lake Erie. Historically, the Rust Belt was the heart of American industrialization. Everything was produced here, including steel, automobiles, textiles, chemicals, and heavy machinery. Many immigrants from Europe, as well as African Americans from southern states, came to the Rust Belt in the early 20th century in search for industrial jobs. Immigration plus employment meant that these cities grew substantially in population. By the late 1940s, the population grew further as the baby boom generation began, when returning World War II veterans started families. By the 1950s, many Rust Belt cities hit their peak populations. The opportunities seemed unlimited, but things were about to change. Starting in the 1960s, globalization started to make an inroad in American industrialization. Many factories realized that if they were to outsource employment to poorer nations, they would save money by paying workers far cheaper wages and not having to give them benefits. Next, Americans started to switch to more white-collar jobs, leading to fewer being employed in blue-collar jobs. Another turning point was a more consciousness of the environment. The Environmental Protection Agency was created by the federal government in 1970 to oversight environmental regulations. Many factories were against this move, so they simply outsourced to poorer countries with lax regulatory practices. These factors culminated in many people moving out of Rust Belt cities to surrounding suburbs. The building of the interstate highway system accelerated this process. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, many Rust Belt cities were a shell of what they once were. Further degradation occurred within these cities, and by the 21st century, some of these cities lost 60 to 70% of their population. By the 2010s, some Rust Belt cities started to see a renaissance, especially Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which transformed from a steel-making city to becoming known for their healthcare, finance, technology, and educational sectors. Cities such as Cleveland, Ohio, and Detroit, Michigan have tried revitalizing their downtowns, which has worked to an extent. However, many Rust Belt cities continue to suffer, even some who are trying to change. In this video, we are going to rank the top 10 most decayed Rust Belt cities. The ranking will be judged by factors such as depopulation, poverty, educational assets, and politics. Of course, rankings may differ based on public opinion, so if you have something to say, please leave a comment in the comment section below. Let's get started. Coming in at number 10 on the list is St. Louis, Missouri. Although St. Louis is home to some Fortune 500 companies, the city has been plagued by a multitude of issues. The poverty and crime rate are both very high, leading to many socioeconomic issues. The 1950 population peaked at 856,000 people, but now it's just 291,000. Obviously, with the population decline like this, the tax base shrinks, and this ultimately leads to services such as education and public safety to take hits. Recently, though, there have been some efforts to revitalize the downtown area of St. Louis. This may help bring back some vigor to the city. Number 9 on the ranking list is Buffalo, New York. Initially an industrial western New York powerhouse, the population of Buffalo went from around 580,000 in 1950 to just below 280,000 today, although Buffalo did gain nearly 20,000 residents since 2010. Still, the population declines have led to economic and educational problems with a smaller tax base. Also, the aging infrastructure of the city is in desperate need of repair, but a lack of city funding has halted many projects. Like St. Louis, Buffalo is trying to reinvent itself as a city. Next up, at number 8, is Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland was an industrial powerhouse city before the 1950s. Its 1950 peak population was 914,000, but now the city only has 361,000 residents, the lowest in 120 years. Manufacturing and steelmaking were crucial industries to the city, but much of it was outsourced, leading to rapid deterioration of the urban landscape. The effects of this include rampant poverty, educational deficits, and crime. One major advantage Cleveland does have is that it's located within a major transportation hub with many crucial interstate highways crossing the city or surrounding it. It's also located on Lake Erie, so this gives the city a water link advantage. At number 7 on the list is Paterson, New Jersey. Historically, Paterson was known as Silk City, producing silk for the textile industry. Since the 1950s, Paterson has seen a progressive decrease in industrialization and a stagnation in its population. Also, crime rates in parts of the city are extremely high. However, some advantages for Paterson include its location and its exceptionally diverse population. Locationally, Paterson is in North Jersey, which is economically doing well. Ethnically, Paterson has a diverse mix of Hispanics, Middle Easterners, African Americans, and Caucasians. Still, without any key industries, Paterson will likely not change that much. Next on the list, and placing sixth, is Altoona, Pennsylvania. Unlike the other cities on the list, Altoona is located in a somewhat rural area of Pennsylvania, surrounded by mountains and natural beauty. But masked within the city are many problems, including economic stagnation, high poverty rates, and a rampant opioid crisis. Drugs plague the city, and with many other socioeconomic issues, these drugs add insult to injury. One advantage the city does have is that Penn State Altoona is located there, bringing some educational opportunities. And like what was mentioned before, the city is located in a mountainous region, bringing along nice scenery. Fifth on the list of decaying Rust Belt cities is Detroit, Michigan. In 1950, Detroit had 1.8 million people, making it the fourth largest city in the United States at the time. The reason for such a high population was that Detroit was the center of the automotive industry, and factories there produced cars for Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. But by the 1960s, the automotive industry started to outsource to other locations, including other American cities in the South and internationally to Canada and Mexico. This plunged Detroit into economic turmoil, and since then, the city has never recovered. Today, the population stands at 620,000 residents. Many neighborhoods in the city have high crime rates and abandoned homes and buildings. Downtown Detroit is starting to slowly revitalize, but this may not be enough to bring the city back to its former might. Ranking at fourth on the list is another Michigan city, Flint. Like Detroit, Flint was an industrial city for the automotive industry. When outsourcing within Detroit began, it also affected Flint. This led to the population decrease, which resulted in economic decline and increasing poverty. Another major issue the city faced between 2014 and 2019 was the Flint water crisis. In 2014, the city, in an effort to cut costs, switched its water supply from the Detroit Water and Sewage Department to the Flint River. Ultimately, this led to bacterial contamination of the water, as well as increasing lead exposures, particularly to children. An emergency was declared in 2016, and since then there have been steps taken to deal with the problem. But the crisis may have long-term health effects yet to be seen. Overall, Flint is a city in great distress. Third on the list of most decayed Rust Belt cities is East St. Louis, Illinois. East St. Louis is a community just east of St. Louis, Missouri, on the other side of the Mississippi River. The population of this community today is a little over 18,000 residents, but in 1950 it peaked at 82,000. During that time period, East St. Louis had a bustling economy associated with industry and a flourishing African American cultural scene. Railroads were a major driver in industrialization here, but by the 1960s, railroads started to be replaced by interstate highways, which in turn adversely affected the community. With very high poverty and crime rates, East St. Louis faces a lot of difficulties. Number 2 on the list is Camden, New Jersey. Located right across the Delaware River from Philadelphia, Camden once flourished as an industrial city, with its population peaking at just over 125,000 people in 1950. Afterwards, deindustrialization of the U.S. led Camden to lose economic opportunities, eventually leading to population loss and increasing urban decay. Also, rampant political corruption made matters worse, and this directly correlated with the lack of investment for education in the city on a whole. Today, Camden is trying to rejuvenate the city, but it may be easier said than done to completely turn around what has happened to the city in the last half century. Finally, number 1 on the list of most decayed Rust Belt cities is Gary, Indiana. Gary Works is a major steel mill located on Lake Michigan and still employs 2,200 workers as of today. But this number has significantly declined even in the last decade. In 2015, 5,000 workers were employed there, and in the 1970s, the mill employed 30,000 people. With the steel mill declining as well as utter deindustrialization, Gary is suffering tremendously from rampant poverty, crime, disinvestment in education, and plummeting property values. Since property values have drastically decreased, lots of abandoned homes and empty lots line city blocks within Gary. Overall, in order for Gary to turn around, it's going to take a lot of investment from the federal government in the state of Indiana, as well as from the private sector. But since Gary is in such distress, people may be wary about investing in this city. So, what solutions can struggling Rust Belt cities come up with to turn around their fortunes? Well, for one, these cities can get back to their roots as industrial cities. Today, there is a large shortage in the United States of blue collar workers, the core people who work in industrialization. Perhaps these cities could provide incentives and training programs to residents who may want employment in blue collar professions. This in turn would add some economic benefits to these cities. Another way these cities can improve is to follow a model that Pittsburgh pursued. In recent years, Pittsburgh has welcomed post-industrial opportunities such as healthcare, education, pharmaceuticals, and finance. This model has proven a great success for the city. Lastly, many Rust Belt cities suffer from corrupt local governments. Corruption is usually the root cause of many issues. If corrupt politicians are held accountable for their actions, residents who really want to fix the situation of their communities could run for local office and be a big asset. These three solutions are just the tip of the iceberg, but they can start a rejuvenation process. What actions do you think Rust Belt cities could take to improve their circumstances? Please leave a comment below if you'd like to chime in. Again, thank you for watching my video. Until next time.